Will Lindy Ruff be back as the coach next season? Something that I've often wondered. He said something earlier this week, has talked a couple times this week about being back, sounding like he is going to be back, or at least wants to be. We'll try to answer that question coming up here in the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody, and welcome into this Thursday edition of the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you listen to your podcast. You could check us out and watch us on our YouTube channel. Like and subscribe us there. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Sneaky Joe DiBiase here. On a game day, the Sabres match up with the Pittsburgh Penguins at KeyBank Center tonight. Two of the worst teams in the Eastern Conference this season, not separated by too much in the standings, despite the fact that they are very different phases of their builds, where the Penguins are an older team, of course, riding out into the sunset with Crosby and Malkin and Letang, and the Sabres, meanwhile, trying to figure out a way to build back up a team that is still the youngest team in the league, or one of the youngest teams in the league. So that matchup is tonight, and we'll get to it a little bit later on today's show. A lot to get to, though, today, including Lindy Ruff and whether he'll be back next season, something that I've been wondering all year long, and I have a stronger sense today about that question than I have throughout the course of the entire year. Just as I'm starting to get a little more clear picture or more of an opinion on Kevyn Adams' tenure. Same thing with Lindy Ruff. And those two also are connected in some way, some form. So get to that. Also, the Sabres releasing their embedded series from the trade deadline. I have a couple of observations of things that I noticed from watching that video that the Sabres released. It's a good watch. You know, it's not going to give you everything. I'd pay real money. How much would I pay? Would you pay $500 for the unedited raw footage? Because obviously, every team would do this. There's a lot of stuff that's left out of there, right? Even when, well, I'll get to it. I don't want to spoil it now. But I had a couple of observations from the embedded series that the Sabres did. The Sabres also, by the way, their blue and gold insights last night, season ticket holders at the arena with the opportunity to ask questions. Of course, though, those would have been read beforehand by staff, as the Sabres should do. And I don't know how many of the real hard-hitting questions got through. There were a couple of questions that got through that were about real talking points, like the losing streak from earlier in the year and regrets there. But then you had some questions about face-offs, and you had some questions about the captaincy, just softball questions that I can't believe a fan would have asked. But enough fans going to these things, asking questions, I guess those are the ones that are more likely to get through. So some of that relates to this question about Lindy. And the question about Lindy is just simply, is he going to be the coach next year? It doesn't have to be the case. There are a couple of things that you could have imagined happening along the way, and still could happen, that would not have him be the head coach behind the bench at the beginning of next season. One of them, the one that I have always wondered about being the most likely, is Lindy just saying, all right, I tried it. I went for a year. It didn't work. It doesn't appear that we're all that close. It was exhausting. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to retire. I'm at an age where coaches are generally retiring at this age anyway. I'm going to walk away, and I'm going to go somewhere warm. I'm going to go to Florida. I'm going to go to an island somewhere. No one would blame Lindy Ruff if he decided to do that, if he wanted to do that. The other way he wouldn't be the coach is Kevyn Adams gets fired. And that is still possible. Kevyn Adams getting fired. And a new GM coming in. We talked about Jarmo Kekalainen the other day, whoever it would be. New GM comes in, wants his own coach. Brings in a new guy. That would be an outside GM hire, though. If they just promoted from within, like a Jason Karmanos, then you might think they just stay in-house. They keep Lindy around for another year, not to blow the whole thing up on the staff. They just replace the GM and not the coach. So that is also a possibility. To me, though, the reason I am much more confident today than I would have been a week ago that Lindy Ruff is going to be the head coach next year, if it's up to him, is he didn't sound like somebody on Tuesday that has the appetite to walk away after not getting the job done. I guess he still could reflect after the season. I'm sure he'll talk to his wife and his family, and then maybe he comes back with a decision that's not what I'm reading into his comments right now. But so the other night, Lindy wins his 600th NHL game with the Buffalo Sabres. 600th game with the Sabres. Only the second coach in league history to do that with the same organization. Al Arbor did it with the New York Islanders. Lindy does it with the Buffalo Sabres. So Lindy getting questions about the season and about his career. And, you know, he gets this question, I think it might have been by Matt Beauvais of Channel 7, about what the urge and the desire to get this fixed, to get this right. And Lindy really talked about wanting to get it right. He really sounded like he's not satisfied with the job not being done. The one analogy that he used that makes me think he wants to be back is that you jump into an old car that you haven't driven for a while. I think he's meaning that to be the Sabres in this instance. He drove the car in a while. And you figure out some of the things that are wrong with it. You open up the hood, and after driving it for a little bit, you can get a sense of what the car needs. And to me, when he's using that analogy, I'm thinking, okay, he's treating or he's thinking about this season as a year where he's just popped the hood open. I mean, I'm sure at the beginning of the year, he wasn't thinking this way. And he even talked about the 13-game losing streak that killed the season, that he believes that there was a good outcome possible this year, but they just couldn't go through a 13-game losing streak and have that happen. So he gets this analogy about popping the hood and kind of letting everyone know, I feel like I have a clearer picture now about what's wrong with this team and what the team needs. As to imply, I'm getting back in the driver's seat. I'm fixing up the car. I want to know what's wrong with it so that I could get back in the driver's seat and drive the car. And that is where I think Lindy wants to be back next year. I'm reading into his comments. He didn't definitively say that, and we'll see after the year. But he certainly sounded like a guy to me that is going to want to fix this thing next season, and he's going to want to do it himself. Now, there were a couple of more things that were said at this Blue and Gold Insights event last night on Wednesday that kind of led to, you know, a similar type of mindset. They talked about the 13-game losing streak. By the way, well, get to this too. I want to talk about Kevyn Adams in the second segment with this embedded thing. But Lindy and Adams talking about next season and talking about the players being in elite shape. Kevyn said, quote, Lindy and I are going to discuss with the players about conditioning in the offseason. Expect players to come into camp in elite shape. That is a comment to me that shows one of the things that they think needs improvement or that they think needs to be different going forward is elite conditioning. And I guess you could kind of, I wouldn't label this a criticism as though the players are lazy or not working hard. I think they are. But there are definitely individuals that you'd like to envision being a different body type. Owen Power is going to be the first name to mind. And by the way, shout out to the Sabre Report, by the way, on Twitter, who live tweeted from this event, or else we might not have really known what was said. So their account posting the quotes. One of the tweets is, guys, they got a question about what do you see from Owen Power, and some laughter from the crowd ensued. I mean, that's where they're at with Owen Power. And Lindy talked about his size and his skating ability, but he's working on strength and quicker decisions. Working on strength. Power is the first name that pops into my mind when thinking about, guys coming into camp next year in elite shape and working on conditioning through the offseason. For when you hear conditioning, you might think about cardio and not getting tired. For me, that word for power means something different. It is just, can he get jacked? To put it frankly, can he get jacked between now and the start of next year? And maybe not. He's got a big frame and he's still a young guy. So not everybody can just put on muscle like that without, pulling the Aaron Ekblad and cheating. And you don't want him to do that. I think people don't want him to do that. I don't want him to do that. That's how you get suspended. But power, putting on that muscle and that strength, it appears that's something they would want. I think of Zach Benson immediately as more the skating conditioning and the power skating that he needs. And then at the same time, maybe for him, right, put on 10 pounds of muscle if you could do it during the offseason. I don't think Dahlin needs anything like that. I don't think Samuelson needs anything like that. Jack Quinn maybe is another one. You might think about being in elite shape, more time to recover from his leg injuries that he's had, and maybe getting a little bit quicker. Power skating might be the thing for him, but I definitely thought of Power and Benson first when I heard those two talking about players coming in elite shape. So that's another thing. Lindy Adams saying him and Lindy have talked about it. Like, Lindy is already thinking about next year. Now, to be fair, so is Adams. And I'm not willing to say right now that Adams is definitely going to be the general manager for next season. So when we come back, a little bit on Adams, one other thing he said yesterday, and then what we picked up on in the embedded video that we had before we get to some Sabres and Penguins talk. That's all ahead here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Sabres is presented by Trade Coffee. Guys, this is a big one for me because I am an early morning riser. I host a radio show starting at 6 o'clock in the morning. My first alarm goes off at 4:30 a.m. There are no coffee shops open at 4:30. There's like one, and you sometimes just don't have the time to do it if you wake up a few minutes late. I got to have coffee ready to go, and I need it to taste good, and I need to know that I'm not, going to be worried about it and trying something out new that I don't like. Trade Coffee. If you're like me, your mornings start with a good cup of coffee. I got tired for settling for all those grocery store brands that just weren't cutting it. That's why I turned to Trade. And let me tell you, the coffee is next level. Best thing, by the way, is that if you don't like the coffee, you go order a couple at a time and different ones if you want. If you don't like one of them, you send it back and they'll send you one that you like until they get it right. Trade is the #1 specialty coffee marketplace in the U.S. that brings you fresh coffee from over 50 of the country's top roasters. The experts have taste tested thousands of coffee, curating over 450 amazing roasts. Whether you're new to coffee or know exactly what you like, they'll handpick a perfect match for you. Right now, Trade is exclusively offering to our listeners 40% off your first order at drinktrade.com/lockedonnhl. That's drinktrade.com/lockedonnhl for 40% off your first order. drinktrade.com/lockedonnhl. Sneaky Joe DiBiase back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. The Sabres play the Penguins tonight. The Sabres dropping a pretty cool behind-the-scenes look at their trade deadline and their embedded series on YouTube. Last night, they posted the video. You can watch it. It's about 15, 20 minutes long, and there's some good stuff in there. There's Adams negotiating with Steve Staios, the general manager of the Ottawa Senators, Don Sweeney, the general manager of the Boston Bruins. It mostly takes you inside. Well, I guess if you think about it, they were the only two trades that were made. The Josh Norris, Dylan Cousins trade and the Henry Jokiharju trade to Boston. The Norris trade, you get a lot about Norris. You get some tidbits about Cousins and the market from before they had made the trade with Ottawa. It's referenced in there that Tampa wanted Cousins. I think that maybe was reported at some point along the way, so not breaking news that Tampa was in on him, but Adams spoke to that Tampa wanted Cousins, that there was a market for Dylan Cousins. And there was a comment from Adams on the phone talking to another general manager. Maybe it was Staios. I don't think it was confirmed on that. I'm assuming it was, that he wanted a center back. Then maybe on the other end of the phone, they're offering a winger or even a defenseman. And Adams making a comment about, it's going to be tough for me to move this center without getting a center back in return. He wanted a true hockey trade, not even like a positional swap, just a guy for a guy needing a change of scenery, needing a different, whatever. So the one thing you don't get out of it, this is the thing I would pay money for. All the video of the trades that don't happen. And obviously, they're not going to drop that. They're not going to make that public. I'd love to see it. I'd love to know. All fans would, I think. But that's one where you're not going to see a team do that ever. The Adams on the phone with blank talking about player blank, and then the trade doesn't fall through, and the player watches it and finds out about it. And now he's still on his other team, and now he's mad at his GM because they know that he was talking about a trade. So you're not going to get that, even though that's the good stuff. The other thing, couple of things, observations. One, Seth Appert, he's a voice in that room. Now, maybe it was just in this one instance because Josh Norris had played for Appert in the U.S. program. They were familiar with each other. So that would be a natural reason why. Appert would be speaking up about Norris and they'd be asking him about it. It just kind of goes along the same trajectory, though, of Appert is an important voice in that building. On the coaching staff, of course, but even in the building, I mean, it's speculation, but it feels like pretty, easy speculation that he is the coach in waiting. If things were to go right, Lindy comes back again next year, they make the playoffs, and Lindy feels satisfied, like, all right, I did my job, I got this thing back on track, now I'm good to retire, that Seth Appert would be the coach in waiting if things were to work out. So him being in that room, him speaking up about a player that he knows about, not really much of a thing, but it just kind of goes along the same path here of Appert is, maybe he's just a little bit more than a normal assistant coach, your typical assistant coach. So there was that. And then as Josh Norris present day is dealing with an injury, and it's undisclosed, so we might think it's the same injury, but we don't know. The Sabres haven't been clear about that. They won't even give us upper body, lower body. There's Adams in the video of Embedded telling the other Sabre staffers that their doctor, the Sabre doctor, said 100% comfortable with Norris and where they stand injury-wise. And that's a little interesting, 100% comfortable, because Norris even admitted this week that the injury he is currently dealing with, this is why it's assumed that it's the shoulder, that the injury he is currently dealing with is the same injury that's been bugging him in Ottawa. He said that this week. So therefore, he had an injury that was bugging him, not enough to keep him out of lineups, but it was nagging throughout his time this season with the Senators. And yet, here's the Sabres and their GM saying 100% comfortable. He was led to that by his own people. And that's just a little bit interesting. I don't know if that's to be anything, but I don't know how you got to 100% comfortable. You could have said 90% comfortable, 80% comfortable, and still wanted to make the trade. But to make it sound like there's no injury risk at all, to me, was very short-sighted, especially if the guy already had an injury. Maybe they didn't know. I can't imagine they didn't know. So anyways, good video. If you pick up on anything else from it and you want to let me know, there was the part about Terry Pegula in the clip, just a couple of, seconds of him speaking through the phone. Nothing really to read into that. He wasn't there, but not that you expect him to be I guess he doesn't live in Florida a lot of the year. So I guess he could have been there, but I'm sure he was doing other things. And do we even want him in the meeting room? Never figured that out. All right. When we come back, Sabres and Penguins, which of these two teams is going to get good first? You might go, of course, Penguins, Crosby. And then you might go, oh, wait, maybe not. They're pretty old. Let's get to that and this matchup when we come back here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Sabres is presented by Indeed. You just realized that your business needed to hire someone yesterday. Well, how can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. If you have been in a spot where you need the right hire like yesterday, the pressure is on. You know that, and every day without the right person is a setback. That's exactly when Indeed sponsored jobs comes in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Right now, speed up that hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now. Support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed, is all you need. Wrapping things up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast with tonight's matchup between the Sabres and the Penguins. The Penguins are having a very bad year. First year with Kyle Dubas at the helm, a very respected GM over the years with Toronto, now in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh 29, 33, and 11. That is 69 points, 20 regulation wins, the second lowest in the East, only behind or ahead of Philly, 3 less than the Sabres, for instance. But they're old. And that is a very different type of season when you are as old as they are versus even where the Sabres are, where they are so young and guys are still coming up and developing. Kulik's a rookie, right? Quinn is like some of your disappointing guys are still young guys. Pittsburgh's old. Look at the top of their depth chart. Crosby has been unbelievable. Number 1 in the NHL in 5-on-5 points. It really is incredible. He and Ovechkin at these ages, approaching 40, still being at the top of their games. Ovechkin's at a 50-goal pace, and Crosby's leading the league in 5-on-5 points. Unbelievable. The conditioning, of course, that you have now in today's NHL. Crosby is such a perfect player all around that you're not surprised by that. But it's really the rest of it for Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, here's the ages of their leading goal scorers, or leading point getters. 37, 31, 32, 34, 38, 31, 29, 37. The top 8, you have one guy below 30. It's Michael Bunting, who just by a couple of months is under 30. Then you get to Anthony Bolivier, who is 27, 20 points. 20 points for the first guy that's not at least approaching 30. So it's all older guys. Rickard Rakell and Brian Rust and Evgeny Malkin and Erik Karlsson and Matt Grzelcyk even. Matt Grzelcyk is 6th on that team in points with 1 goal and 33 assists. They just have not supported Crosby well. And to me, he's not leaving. You know, it might be cool to think about him leaving, going to Colorado with his buddy McKinnon and taking one last shot at a cup. But it seems like he's Penguins till I die. So he's not leaving there. So with that in mind, Pittsburgh, I think, has kind of bungled this the last couple of seasons. I think when Crosby was like 34, they were coming out of that build. They had traded Kessel away. Fleury's gone, long gone at that point, right? And Matt Murray's gone. Time to maybe hit the refresh button. Not the restart button, but the refresh button. With a mini 2-year build to get back to serious contention, Stanley Cup contention, by the time Crosby is 36. And then let's go in one last time in his career. And that really would have taken the Stones to trade away Malkin and Letang, which they had opportunities to do. And I'm not even saying those two are the biggest problems, although they have certainly dropped off. Their advanced numbers have dropped off. Malkin has gone from a point per game player to, last year was 67 points in 82 games, and this year he's got 46 points in 62 games. So the offense for him has dropped off a bit, and you could say the same with Letang. So the decision to re-up those two and not cash in on a bunch of assets. You didn't even have to draft with like picks and prospects. You could have spun that around for guys that are 7 years younger than the two they have. And by now they might be contending again. But because they tried to squeeze the lemon or every last bit of lemon juice out of that they could, they wrung it dry. And now they're sitting here with Crosby at 37. And to me, there's no end in sight to them being at the bottom of the standings. I don't see a future. They have no prospects to speak of. They don't have any guys that are 23, 24 that are ready to make the next step. They're only going to get worse. So I think they've kind of bungled this in terms of giving Crosby one last shot at a cup. There's no chance, in my opinion, there is no chance that team is competing for a cup again while Crosby is on that hockey team, barring something unforeseen. Like they get 2-3 dumb GMs to give them ridiculous trades for those old guys now. They should really cash in on Raquel. So for tonight's game, Penguins are the matchup, and the Sabres lineup is going to be pretty thin. It's been thin, but Jason Zucker out for the game with a family matter. Jordan Greenway wasn't practicing on Wednesday morning, and neither was, Sam Lafferty was practicing, but he might miss the game. There's some stuff going on with him. So at practice, what you saw, Kulik, Benson, and Thompson, McLeod, Quinn, and Peterka, Krebs with Roseanne and Tuck. Now, I like that because I've been wanting to see Roseanne on a line that's not the fourth line, playing a few more minutes, at least in the double digits. Krebs and Tuck. I like him with Tuck at least. Let me see him with a real scorer and see if he could do anything at the NHL level. Kozak, Malenstein, Lafferty at the bottom, but Josh Dunn might have to play if Lafferty cannot. And the rest of it looks the same, except for James Reimer getting his third start in 4 games and his fourth start in 5 games, third start in a row. That's what it is. Reimer earning these starts. I mean, he's been better. And they're just going to keep riding with him, I guess, going forward. The bottom of the standings race, if you are interested, because the lottery I saw is going to be May 5th. The Sabres are 4th from the bottom in the NHL. They are 1 point behind Philly, who, by the way, we'll talk about this tomorrow. John Tortorella out as Flyers coach. 1 point behind Philly with 3 games in hand. They're probably going to catch the Flyers. That would be 5th from the bottom. They're 2 points behind the Kraken. They have 2 games in hand. That could be another team you pass. Now you're 6th from the bottom. And then there's Pittsburgh. Sabres are 5 points back of Pittsburgh with 3 games in hand. I am not actively rooting against the Sabres in this game. I'm just saying if they lose, not the end of the world, because you catch Pittsburgh, who you'd be 3 points back of with 3 games in hand if you win tonight in regulation. Well, now you're talking about maybe being as low as the 7th pick, 8th pick even, instead of the 3rd or the 4th pick. That could be a big difference given there is a gap in the draft rankings right around the 4th or 5th draft pick. And you don't want to fall below that, but obviously it's not valuable enough to where they should do anything active about it. Which might be starting Luukkonen right now, right? I mean, you would sit Reimer. If you wanted to be at the bottom of the standings, you would sit Reimer because Reimer's on a heater. All right, enjoy the game. That'll do it for us. If you want to share your opinion on Lindy's future with the team, whether you want him back next year, let me know what you think at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSabres. That's the place you can sign up for our text club. We'll talk to you tomorrow after Sabres and Penguins. You're in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Be sure to check out Locked On NHL. Make them your second listen. All the local hosts from across Locked On NHL. Gil Martin leading the way from Locked On Islanders. All your league-wide stories that matter. Check it out wherever you get your podcasts. We'll talk to you tomorrow here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.